The most underrated and low-key craziest storyline in the entire NBA right now is what's happening with Jayson Tatum. A superstar who just 5 months ago tore his Achilles in the playoffs is now back on the court, dunking basketballs like nothing ever happened. And the moment those clips hit the internet, fans and analysts went wild. Suddenly, people started imagining what the Boston Celtics would look like if their franchise player somehow came back this very season. Let's be clear here. Nobody's talking about Tatum making some wild early season return. That's not even on the table. But what's really shaking the NBA world right now is the growing belief that a February or March comeback might actually be possible. Think about that for a second. A 5-month post-Achilles tear, Tatum eyeing a return before the postseason. That's the kind of story that sends shockwaves across the league. Tatum himself added fuel to this fire. He didn't just sit back and let the rumors cook. He went straight to Shams Charania and made it clear, "I want to return this season." That's not hearsay. That's not speculation. That's the mentality of a cold-blooded competitor who refuses to sit on the sidelines. And when a player of his caliber starts sending out that kind of energy, you can bet the entire organization starts to dream big. And honestly, from a basketball perspective, it's easy to see why the Celtics might buy into this dream. The Eastern Conference right now isn't some impossible gauntlet. It's wide open. Indiana Pacers are in trouble without Tyrese Halliburton. Orlando Magic and Atlanta Hawks are still in that on-the-rise but not there yet zone. At the top, sure, you've got New York Knicks and Cleveland Cavaliers, but there's no monster team that's untouchable. So you can almost picture the Celtics front office and locker room whispering, if Tatum's back, and if he's even 85% of himself, why can't we make a run? And honestly, it's tempting. The idea of Tatum walking back into the playoffs and immediately elevating this team. It's like a movie script waiting to be written. But here's the thing. When you really stop and think about it, reality hits like a brick wall. This isn't some minor sprain or light injury. We're talking about a torn Achilles. Historically, this injury has taken down superstars. This is the same type of tear that sidelined Kevin Durant for over a year. And Durant's comeback only worked because the Brooklyn Nets were patient. Painfully patient. He didn't rush. There was no gamble. And even with the extra time, that road back was brutal. Normally, when you tear your Achilles, you miss the next season. Period. End of story. If it happens in the playoffs, then it's not just next season. You're practically guaranteed to sit out the entire year. The Achilles is no joke. It's a make-or-break moment in a player's career. Come back too early, and you're risking everything. Yes, modern medicine has evolved. Rehab protocols are improving. Players are recovering faster than ever before. But here's the harsh truth nobody seems to want to say out loud. 5 months post-Achilles tear is still insanely early. And while the Celtics may see a window in a softer East, they're playing with fire if they think this is a typical comeback. Tatum's desire to return is pure. It's everything you want from a franchise player. Leadership, competitiveness, fire. But this isn't about willpower. This isn't about hype. This is about biology, recovery, and history. The league has seen legends fall because they tried to be superheroes before their bodies were ready. And that's why this entire situation is so wild. The Celtics might look at this season as a chance to semi-compete if Tatum returns. But in reality, this isn't the 2024 Celtics that dominated. This is a team in transition. A team with a star facing one of the most dangerous injuries in sports. And the idea of rushing him back might be the riskiest move of the year. Jayson Tatum returning this season just doesn't make sense when you actually look at what this Boston team is right now. Even if by some miracle you got the pre-injury 100% healthy Tatum back, which, let's be honest, is nearly impossible in the middle of a season after an Achilles tear. This roster isn't built to compete for a championship anymore. The Celtics themselves made it pretty clear with their offseason moves. They moved off guys like Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. They let veterans like Al Horford and Luke Kornet walk away. And they didn't replace that talent. Why? Because they knew this year wasn't about contending. It was about hitting the reset button. They wanted to save a massive amount of money, regroup, maybe land a pick, and prepare for a full-strength return next season when Tatum would be ready to go from day one. Everything they did this offseason revolved around that idea, that Jayson Tatum was not going to play this season after that brutal postseason Achilles injury. That was the plan. So now the idea that he could suddenly return in March and somehow change everything? That's just not realistic. Because even if Tatum comes back, this version of the Celtics is nowhere near the powerhouse they were last season. Their front court depth is straight up ugly. You look at the depth chart and it's clear. It's not good. Even if Tatum is 85%, you're still looking at a rotation that's far from a title team. Yes, there's Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Peyton Pritchard. Yes, adding Tatum to that group gives you 4 solid starters. You could slide in someone like Anthony Simons or whoever else to fill out the 5. But let's be real, after that starting lineup, there's nothing. The depth just isn't there. This isn't a team stacked with reliable bench guys who can give you strong minutes in the playoffs. This is a team with one of the weakest supporting casts they've had in years once you remove the stars. People are underestimating how big that drop-off is. Once you get past the top 3 or 4 guys, this is barely an NBA-level roster. That's not an exaggeration, it's just facts. So even if Tatum returns early, even if he's somehow 85% ready to go in March, this team isn't suddenly jumping into the contender conversation. They're not better than Cleveland. They're not better than New York. And honestly, teams like Atlanta and Orlando might actually be ahead of them in terms of roster strength and depth this year. So why would you risk the health of your franchise cornerstone on a team that probably tops out as a play-in squad? What's the point of rushing back from an Achilles injury just to fight for the 8th seed, play maybe 7 regular season games, and then go straight into a brutal playoff series where you're likely out in the first round? That's not just risky, that's reckless. Achilles injuries are no joke. You don't gamble on your superstar's long-term health just to try to win a couple of meaningless games in a season where your team isn't built to go the distance. If Boston is way below win at 500 by February, there's zero chance they bring Tatum back. It wouldn't make sense. And if they're slightly above 500, sure, maybe there's a conversation. But even then, it's a dangerous bet. You're risking long-term health for short-term, low-upside gain. That's not smart team building. If I was running this team, I'd fully embrace the gap year. Let Jaylen Brown shoot 30 times a night. Let the young guys get reps. Take the L, reset the books, and come back next season with a healthy Tatum and a fresh supporting cast ready to go. That's how you protect your franchise star. Let's be honest, if Boston decides to ride out this season without Jayson Tatum, it's not the end of the world. In fact, it might actually be the smartest thing they could do. You give guys like Baylor Scheiman real minutes. Let the young players get valuable reps, maybe win 30 or 32 games, and see what happens in the lottery. The Eastern Conference isn't stacked top to bottom, so even a mediocre team can end up with a decent pick. And guess what? Boston actually owns its first rounder this year. That alone makes a gap year way more valuable. Then heading into the 2026-27 season, you'd have Tatum fully healthy, Jaylen Brown still in his prime, and a fresh young talent from the draft. Add in some flexibility to spend in free agency, and suddenly the Celtics are back in the fight with real momentum, not desperation. Yes, it would hurt to take a step back after years of being a dominant force in the East. Boston's been one of the most consistent teams in basketball for nearly a decade. But sacrificing one season to reset properly is a lot smarter than gambling everything on a rushed Tatum return. Think about the worst-case scenario here. He comes back in March, plays a handful of games, pushes his body too soon, and then re-injures that Achilles in the playoffs. That's not just bad, that's catastrophic. You'd be right back where you started, except this time the clock on Tatum's prime would be ticking even louder. That kind of risk just doesn't make sense. And no matter how weak the East might look on paper, people are underestimating how flawed this Celtics roster really is right now. Even with Tatum, this isn't a championship team. This isn't the juggernaut that Boston fans are used to. It's a roster full of holes, thin depth, and no real front court support. Dropping Tatum into this group doesn't magically fix everything. Now, to be fair, there is one scenario where playing Tatum could make a little bit of sense, and it's not about winning. It's about mindset. When Paul George had that devastating leg injury with Team USA, the Indiana Pacers let him play just a handful of games at the end of the season, not to compete, but to give him something to work toward during rehab. A light at the end of the tunnel. Something to remind him, this is where you're headed. Keep going. If the Celtics are hovering around 500 late in the season and Tatum's rehab is ahead of schedule, I could understand giving him 15 to 20 minutes a night just to ease him back in. No pressure, no expectations, just rhythm work. But even then, if I'm making the call, I'm sitting him the entire year. Period. It's cool that Tatum wants to play. That competitiveness is what makes him special. But there's a huge difference between being competitive and being careless with your franchise cornerstone. Over the next few years, he's going to be making upwards of $60 to $70 million a year. You're not paying that kind of money for 80% of Tatum. You're paying for the MVP level Tatum, the 90 to 95, 99% version, the one who can carry Boston deep into the playoffs. And if he doesn't fully recover from this Achilles injury, if he comes back too soon and something goes wrong, everything Boston's been building for collapses overnight. The franchise timeline resets, the window shrinks, the future changes. And that is not a gamble you ever make with a player like Jayson Tatum. He got hurt in the playoffs. We're barely 5 months out from that moment. This isn't something you rush. If it had happened a year earlier, maybe it's a different conversation. But now? No chance. Bringing him back this season would be reckless, unnecessary, and honestly, absurd. If Boston wants to protect its future, the only smart play is to let Tatum heal, let this team reset, and come back next season ready to fight for something real.